LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 10th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. My mother, when I spoke to her earlier, said she might watch, so happy Mother's Day again to my mom if she's watching. I hope all of you, again, are staying safe and well during this pandemic. Thanks for joining me. This week I have the 12 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be really informative media criticism and political commentary fair use show for you all tonight. Down in the video description, you can find my clip list to of my notes to myself on my 12 clips. Also, the source of all the clips, all the shows that I took the clips from, there are links down there, including to the Saturday Night Live clip that I took the thumbnail of Alec Baldwin playing Donald Trump in the season finale of Saturday Night Live that I'll get to. But I want to talk briefly about my topic, which is not necessarily self-explanatory, Trump necropolitics. And it's this theory I've seen that there's some evidence, some of the evidence supports this theory that Trump's rush to reopen the U.S. economy without testing and tracing that's necessary to respond to viral outbreaks, that it could be this necropolitics in which some Republicans believe they can avoid an economic crisis and the costs of stay-at-home orders because it's possible that the people who die from COVID-19 are going to be disproportionately poor people, elderly people, people of color, basically not Republicans. Now, there are some problems with this theory, or there are problems with this plan if that's actually the Trump Republican plan. First, you can't have, hundreds of thousands of people die without it causing economic disruption. And also loss of consumer confidence, the ability of people to go out and do the economic activity that they think that they're saving. And of course, you can't, just because there's disproportionate death in some of these areas, you've seen like cases at the White House. Sandy's scratching herself, so maybe that means it's time for me to get to the first clip, which I'll talk about this whole necropolitics thing as I play through the newsmaker clips, but I want to start with political comedy. Like I said, the season finale of Saturday Night Live, Alec Baldwin as Trump giving a Zoom high school graduation speech. There were a bunch of good one-liners in it, starting with his, I start the clip with one of the good one-liners. He's addressing the class of COVID-19, and I'll discuss that a little more with you as we watch that clip together over here.
Congratulations to the class of COVID-19. Wow, what incredible energy and excitement I'm feeling right now. Now, my valet got the virus, so I had to do my own makeup. I had to resort to a Liza Minnelli TikTok makeup tutorial. I'm so honored to be your valedictator, but today is not about me, it's about you. Although I should spend a little time on me first, because I've been treated very poorly, even worse than they treated Lincoln.
I'm sorry, wasn't Lincoln assassinated?
I'm not taking questions, Bebop. I'm only telling you the truth. Lincoln would agree. He's probably smiling up at me from hell right now.
Hey, what is this,
Hey,
dude?
let's mute him. Let's mute a lot of the jazz types.
Oh, no,
okay?
he did not. What are you...
Great. You're actually lucky to be graduating right now. There are so many exciting new jobs out there, like grocery store bouncer, cam girl, porch pirate, amateur nurse, and coal. Don't forget about coal. It's in the ground, and you just dig down and grab it.
I don't want to do that.
And I'm going to make sure colleges are open in the fall. Online college is a scam, and I should know my online college was ranked #1 craziest scam by U.S. News every year it was open.
Yo, we want Fauci!
Oh, sure. Everyone loves Fauci.
Fauci!
And don't you hate when these elite medical experts tell you what to do? Just, excuse me. Good old invincibility juice. Ew. Cheers to you guys. Look.
I like how they all drop off there at the end. And I actually toyed with the idea of using a picture of the Alec Baldwin Trump drinking the Clorox. I could have gotten like the brand name, and it could have been like really visible. It probably would have been eye-catching. And but then I thought, YouTube might actually take that down because it's basically showing someone drinking bleach. Like it's kind of like the promotion of the drinking of bleach, and in a way, they would be kind of right. You don't want to show a picture of someone drinking bleach. Of course, they don't take down the White House press briefing where Trump suggested injecting disinfectants. But anyway, that was a couple weeks old. But Saturday Night Live hasn't been around the last couple weeks, or last week anyway. I thought the whole stay-at-home episode, the season finale, was pretty good, just like the last time. I somehow producing the first stay-at-home one, as I talked about when I took that clip from Weekend Update with the weird like cast and crew giggling in the background, that didn't work at all. But after that, it's gotten a lot better. And I don't know why the writing on Saturday Night Live seems better when they're working from home. Any theories? You can let me know what you think about that. But it was a pretty good Donald Trump impression. Especially, I was looking through the thumbnails to get, or through the video to get a thumbnail that I used for my live stream. And he does the Donald Trump mouth. Alec Baldwin, there's these weird things that Donald Trump does with either that or Alec Baldwin just naturally has many of the same mouth movements as Donald Trump. I don't know. I choose to believe it's Alec Baldwin's acting. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But I want to get to the actual news. And one thing I forgot to say about the whole necropolitics theory. One of the place I first heard about this was on AM Joy last weekend. Here's a tweet. And I actually put a link down in the video description to this tweet, which also goes to the MSNBC clip where they have Professor Crunk talking about the politics of death. They use the word necropolitics behind the choice to reopen in some states. And so I didn't want to... I don't think I left anyone with the impression that I came up with the word necropolitics, but that's actually where I first heard about it. And I think it's I don't know, it's sort of a rationale for a non-rational plan that seems a confusing plan even. That the first two news summaries I'm going to show you both talk about Trump being confused and confusing. In fact, the Meet the Press news summary, which as usual is the best of the news summaries, it's the longest of the news summaries. It shows a lot of the confusion coming out of the contradictions coming out of the Trump administration, and even more stuff came up with Mike Pence just since the news shows this morning, where he was going to social distance, because now they're in the White House, and Fauci and the head of the CDC and the head of the FDA, Stephen Hahn. What's the guy's name? Is it Redfield? I can't remember the name of the head of the CDC, but they're all like in quarantine. And Stephen Miller's wife, you'll see in some of these news summaries. But the whole confusion thing I was talking about, both of the next two news summaries mention Trump. Well, the second one I'm going to show is Jake Tapper saying the State of the Union this week is confused. But if you listen to Chuck Todd in the introduction to the NBC News Meet the Press news summary here, at one point he says, it's not partisan to say Trump's response to the pandemic has been confused and confusing. I don't know. I might not go so far as to say that's not partisan to say, but I happen to think it's true, but it's also partisan to say. And anyway, there are a lot more things in my notes. And you can read through my notes at the link in the video description, but I will talk more about what I think about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary after we watch that 4-minute, 19-second clip together over here.
Good Sunday morning and a happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. President Trump is making it clear that he's moving away from fighting the coronavirus to cheerleading an economic recovery. On Tuesday, Mr. Trump announced he was winding down the White House task force. Then a day later undid the undoing while continuing to urge the reopening of the country in defiance even of his own task force reopening guidelines. The president also chose not to wear a mask at a mask-producing factory because the AP reported he believes it would send the message that he's more concerned with health than with the economy. Meanwhile, 3 top health officials have become a partial or full self-quarantine after 2 people working in the White House became infected, indicating just how hard it is to keep the virus out of even the most tested and secure workplaces in this country. All this on a week when the confirmed number of cases in the United States passed 1.3 million and the death toll is approaching 80,000 now. It is not partisan to say the administration's response to this coronavirus pandemic has been both confused and confusing, and it raises troubling questions. What's the plan for testing and contact tracing? Or does the federal government think that's just too hard to do without a breakthrough? What's the plan for maintaining social distancing as states reopen? What's the plan for making people feel confident about returning to work when even the White House can't keep the virus out? And what's the plan for treating this pandemic as our greatest national crisis since the Second World War? In other words, what's the plan?
People want to come back. I think everybody in this room realizes we have to come back.
Facing a pandemic that shows no signs of containment, the president is making it clear he is not willing to wait for a national decline in cases or deaths, instead pushing states to reopen now.
There'll be more death, but the virus will pass. I used to say 65,000, and now I'm saying 80 or 90, and it goes up.
We may be talking about 95,000 people ultimately. We may be talking about something more than that.
The White House is sidelining scientists, delaying the CDC's attempts at issuing detailed guidelines, reportedly out of fear they were too stringent.
And I respect the governors, and I've given them great discretion.
I've given the leeway to the governors.
Do you find the CDC protocols to be an impediment to opening up the country?
Which protocols?
The recommended guidelines that have been.
No, because I'm relying on the governors.
The administration distanced itself from a draft federal government report predicting an uptick in new coronavirus cases and 3,000 deaths a day by June 1st. And the president announced the White House task force was off.
We're now looking at a little bit of a different form.
Before declaring it on again after public pushback.
So we're keeping the task force for a period of time.
And Mr. Trump is dismissing the consensus of public health experts that widespread testing is a necessary step to reopening businesses safely.
In a way, by doing all of this testing, we make ourselves look bad.
Repeating his claim that the virus will disappear on its own.
I feel about vaccines like I feel about tests. This is going to go away without a vaccine.
The president's skepticism of public health guidance is now being echoed by many of the governors who support him.
These models have been so wrong from day one.
Those models keep changing, so really they're not very good.
Because we did so much more testing, we have more cases.
We were going to the hot spot and we were testing, so of course our positive cases are going to increase.
We have to be warriors. We can't keep our country closed down for years.
We can't keep our economy shut down forever.
But 68% of Americans continue to say they are more concerned that state governments will lift restrictions too quickly than that they may take too long. Still, with the unemployment rate now 14.7%, pressure is growing, and the president is accusing Democrats of slowing reopening to damage him politically.
They think they're doing it because it'll hurt me the longer it takes to hurt me in the election, the longer it takes to open up.
And joining me now are 2 infectious disease experts. Michael Osterholm from the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, 2 infectious disease experts. I did not take a clip of that because actually the one thing I forgot to say about that news summary that it's stressed really well, in addition to holding Trump accountable for all of his craziness and being confused and confusing, as Chuck Todd asserted there. Boldly, it was not partisan to say, but it also stressed the what's the plan, what's the plan, what's the plan, and that's the whole thing, that nobody wants everyone to have to stay at home forever, but there has to be a plan to avoid massive death when people stop staying at home, and that involves testing and tracing, and that's what's lacking. That's one of the huge failures of the Trump administration, and there was nothing really all that exciting about Meet the Press. That he did talk to all these health experts who aren't really newsmakers, but talked about what the plan is and got some really good information. You can see all of Meet the Press down in the video description, a link to Meet the Press I put down there. But then this morning, after I watched Meet the Press, I saw Meet the Press was trending on Twitter. And I like, why? It didn't seem like there was anything all that noteworthy. And then I saw all these people were talking about the Lamar Alexander interview and his dog in the background. And so I actually went back and whether the dog was like a real dog, and because it doesn't move at all. And later, Lamar Alexander tweeted that his dog Rufus was in fact a real dog. But the last clip I'm going to show you is that Lamar Alexander clip. The topic isn't all that exciting. It's about how to create demand, and he does talk about a little bit about Anthony Fauci coming to testify to his committee tomorrow, and I think there's a great question he can't answer that maybe he should ask Anthony Fauci about. But the real reason I took that clip, and it's clip number 11 on your clip list, is because of the dog in the background. And then I'm going to focus in on the dog and play that 50 seconds focused on the dog for you over again, and you can tell me if you really believe it's a real dog. But that's clip 11 and clip 12 at the end. And then I have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip, a dandy clip if you like, of my cat and dog at the food and water bowl together. Actually both, one eating, one drinking. It's, I don't know. It's not as, it's, well, more actual excitement and activity than Lamar Alexander, the senator from Tennessee, right? His supposedly live dog, but we'll talk about that when we get to that clip. That's the only other Meet the Press clip I'm going to show you. The next news summaries are not as extensive as Meet the Press. I did mention that Jake Tapper in this next clip also talks about the Trump administration being confused, or him being confused by the Trump administration. Also talks about the number of cases, 1.3 million, the number of dead, 78,000, and how they're reopening in the States, but the virus is out of control in the White House itself, more of which we will discuss after we watch that 2-minute news summary together from CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is confused. This morning there are more than 1.3 million cases of coronavirus in the U.S. and more than 78,000 Americans dead. The grim metrics come as states across the country are beginning to loosen their restrictions, and President Trump is urging Americans to start resuming normal life. But the administration, to be frank, cannot even get control of this pandemic within the White House. Late Saturday, we learned 3 top members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Dr. Redfield, who heads the CDC, Dr. Hahn, who heads the FDA, and Dr. Fauci, will now go into some form of quarantine after exposure to a White House staffer who tested positive. There are now 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 among White House staff members. And while we wish them a speedy recovery, it is worth pointing out that the White House benefits from surveillance testing and contact tracing, working hard to contain the spread at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to keep those 2 aides from spreading the virus to, say, President Trump. And yet, President Trump is refusing to heed the warnings of those on his task force, calling for him to mobilize an aggressive testing program so that the public, too, is able to benefit from surveillance testing and contact tracing. So, for instance, you are safer at work or church, and your kids are better protected at school or at camp this summer. The lack of widespread organized testing is making it especially hard for Americans and businesses to feel safe as we all begin to reopen. And that's an issue that could have long-lasting economic consequences, as the nation is already facing the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression, with news on Friday that more than 20 million jobs were lost in the month of April. I want to get straight to White House Senior Advisor Kevin Hassett.
And I will have a clip of Jake Tapper doing a good cross-examination of Kevin Hassett, but not on the point that I think he should be cross-examined on, and that's something to look forward to. Clip 8 and then 8A is my still frame of what Kevin Hassett should be cross-examined on. Kevin Hassett was on both CNN State of the Union and Face the Nation and got away without either Jake Tapper or Margaret Brennan questioning him about this weird cubic model that he's responsible for, that supposedly we were going to be done with the coronavirus by now. But I was just reminded of that by the Kevin Hassett thing there. I actually thought Jake Tapper's argument there was really tight. It wasn't as extensive as what you saw from Meet the Press, but I think he really contrasted. He talked about the number of deaths. He talked about how they're opening the states, like I said before, I showed the clip with that, while the coronavirus is out of control. Oh, and I had an anonymous live commenter mention it's Robert Redfield is the director of the CDC, and not someone who's anonymous, who was anonymous was the name of the person who pointed it out. And you saw Jake Tapper mention Stephen Hahn, Robert Redfield, and Anthony Fauci, all heads of big, important COVID-19 agencies, all sidelined, well, at least quarantined, although they're going to be testifying. And like I said, Lamar Alexander at the end is the head of the committee that Anthony Fauci is testifying to in the Senate this week. And he raises a question that maybe he should ask Anthony Fauci when I get to clip 11 and clip 12 with the dog in the background. But I also thought that was really balanced in terms of the deaths and then the economic damage. I think I've talked about how all the corporate media, well, first, because they're corporate, they have a bias, not a political bias, but a corporate bias for, what's good for big corporations, because they're all big corporations. The stock market's doing okay for the moment, but they're worried about the economy. And so, and then they also, all the media has this news, by definition, is stuff that is new. And so there's a bias for the new, even, like the same number of people died this week, or maybe even a little more, or we're kind of at a plateau in deaths. So death every week, it's not new anymore, but the new unemployment rate up to 14.7%, and the economic news, that is, and the largest unemployment since the Great Depression, that is news. But is it bigger news than all these people dying? Is the economic news more important than the health crisis, coronavirus, COVID-19 news? I don't know. As I go through my news summaries, they get more and more economy heavy, even though the corporate media is always, of course, focused on what's important for big corporations. But anyway, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos is... who is a COVID-19 survivor, was on talking about some of the worst records ever in terms of the jobs numbers, and but does talk about the lack of food, which it's not big corporations that are going hungry; it's real people who don't have jobs. That's what the unemployment rate is. If you're focusing on real human need, that is an important story when people can't get food, and you'll see that emphasized in all of these next three economic stories, starting with ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos and their 82-second news summary this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week, a week that set some of the worst records ever for the American economy. It all became clear on Friday. We learned that morning that 20.5 million Americans lost their jobs in April, 10 times the record set in 1945 when the country demobilized from World War II. The unemployment rate jumped to 14.7%, the highest since the Great Depression. We've never seen it rise so high so fast. Just 3 months ago, unemployment was at a record low of 3.5%. And as stunning as those numbers are, they don't capture the depth of the damage. Add in workers who've been looking for full-time jobs, the furloughed would hope to get their old jobs back, and more than 1 in 4 Americans is out of work. The lines at food banks are heartbreaking. We can all hope that the economy will bounce back once the virus is contained. Investors seem to be betting on it. By the close of business Friday, the stock market was building on some of its best weeks in decades. So what is Wall Street seeing that Americans aren't yet feeling? How long will the recovery take? What must we do to make sure it happens? And we start with the President's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow. Larry, thank you for joining us.
I don't know what Larry Kudlow was looking at his notes, maybe getting ready there. I guess he got a little taken unawares there by the camera turning on for him. But I do have a Larry Kudlow clip. I gave kudos to, I believe it was Jake Tapper asking Larry Kudlow last week, or in the last couple weeks, about his virus being contained thing, and that's not something George Stephanopoulos asked him about. I will have a Larry Kudlow clip coming up, clip number 10, but you saw that was much more based on the economy. You can compare that news summary to the others, and now CBS News' Face the Nation and Fox News Sunday. I sometimes call CBS as Fox News Light. It's like Fox News if it was actually a journalistic organization rather than a, it has more of a rightward tilt, but it's not so far like if you read the book The Loudest Voice in the Room over here about how Fox News was created as a partisan political operation to help the Republican Party by Roger Ailes. That's not true of any of the other corporate news media, even though they do have corporate bias towards what's good for big corporations, towards sensationalism, towards what's new, towards both sidism. I've talked about all the bias in the corporate media that isn't as bad as the Fox News partisan political bias, but I sometimes refer to CBS News as Face the Nation or CBS as Fox News Light because they tend to cover the stories a little bit towards that spin, but not so bad as to be an actual propaganda arm of the Republican Party. And I think there's even a clip of some guy in a car talking about how he's lost his job or something that's both in the Face the Nation and Fox News Sunday news summary. I'll have to rewatch it to be sure. But anyway, here's Margaret Brennan with a brief introduction and then going over to Mark Strassman. And you notice it's based on the financial. And I don't know, is that because it's what's important to big corporations, or is it because that's what the new news is? You can let me know what you think after we watch this 3-minute news summary for Margaret Brennan and then Mark Strassman on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin today with the financial fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. The numbers are brutal. The official unemployment rate jumped more than 10 points from 4.4% for March to April's 14.7%. CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman is in Atlanta. Mark?
Good morning, Margaret. If you think about it, 1 month is all it took. 1 month for the best jobs economy in the last 50 years to plummet into worries about a second Great Depression. Hunger is motivating. By 5 a.m. in Connecticut, this grocery giveaway had a line of cars waiting.
We need food. My son-in-law's laid off, my daughter-in-law's laid off, and I'm handicapped.
Nearly 1 in 5 mothers with children under 12 now report their families don't have enough to eat. Today's food lines recall soup lines during the Great Depression.
There is a broader unemployment rate, a rate that encompasses people who may be sidelined because they are not actually looking for work actively, and that rate is nearly 23% unemployment.
That is a Depression-era number. Like hunger marchers in 1932, protesters in 2020 pushed to reclaim their piece of America and its economy in deep freeze. On this Mother's Day weekend, this protest in Olympia, Washington, drew more than 1,000 people. They demanded the governor speed up his reopening plan. Tesla is fed up with California. Let its factory reopen, or the carmaker says it will move to Texas or Nevada. And Florida is reopening salons and barbershops tomorrow.
There was a lot of doomsday predictions for Florida. Those have not borne out.
Maybe not. But last week was Florida's deadliest since its COVID outbreak began. So much about America's economy now rides on the unknown, containing COVID-19, whether the virus resurges later this year, and when people feel safe again. Polls show most Americans expect a full recovery to take at least a year. Some financial analysts argue count on a decade.
Any hope of what we would like to call a V-shaped recovery, one where you go down sharply and recover sharply, I think that's thrown out the window.
Georgia led the country with its limited reopening. Consumer response has been mixed, and many eligible stores have stayed closed. And in the roughly 2 weeks since the state eased its restrictions, new COVID cases have gone up more than 20%. Margaret?
Mark Strassman, thanks. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer has our report about what's going on in the rest of the world.
Margaret, despite passing that grim milestone.
And that was Elizabeth Palmer from London. And as I've said on previous weeks, if you go down to the Face the Nation link I put down in the video description, it actually goes to the Face the Nation YouTube channel where pretty much the entire show is split up into segments. And I think you can watch Elizabeth Palmer's report where she talks about coronavirus around the world. And there's some interesting comparisons of authoritarian governments trying to pretend it's not happening. What's happening in Russia with Putin and I think Belarus, I can't remember the name of that dictator, and then also with Bolsonaro and Brazil, how they're trying to pretend the virus isn't happening and it's not going well for them, and also other things going on around the world. One thing that I thought, I thought that that Face the Nation news summary, even though it focused more on the economic consequences, that you saw Margaret Brennan at the beginning say the numbers are brutal, and then she talks about unemployment numbers, not the almost 80,000 deaths. Like I said, I think that's a little incongruous, and maybe it's because it's something that's new, and deaths from this pandemic aren't new news anymore. Or, well, anyway, I talked about that beforehand, but they also talked about the protests there and didn't really give the context you saw in the Meet the Press news summary, where how basically 2/3 of Americans are worried that states are opening too fast. So the protests are basically a 30%, 1/3 of the country at best believe what those protesters are protesting for, and might not even be that much. So that's one criticism of the Face the Nation news summary there. And then, of course, the Fox News Sunday news summary is kind of like that Face the Nation one, but even worse. They talk about some of the same bad economic news. You can even see David Spunt, the Fox News Sunday reporter, saying, even Trump can't spin this in his, Norman Vincent Peale power of positive thinking method that I saw discussed on AM Joy this morning, and I've heard about before, how Trump believes if you just say things are going great enough, it's actually going to happen. And so I think this Fox News Sunday news summary is more spun so that the bad economic news is the rationale for why we've got to open things up. We can't keep the economy shut down because people are suffering. Although people are suffering, I'm not saying that's not true. And anyway, let me look at my notes here real quick on the Fox News Sunday final news summary, clip number 6 here. Oh, that's right. He says even Trump has a problem finding a silver lining. So that's sort of a criticism of Trump in this news summary. But it's, like I said, I think it's all spun more as a rationale for Trump reopening the economy, which is part of the whole Trump necropolitics I talked about at the beginning. And maybe I'll talk about a little more after we watch the 2-minute, 40-second Fox News Sunday news summary. Chris Wallace with his introduction here. First, where he actually does talk about the number of cases and the number of dead, the 1.3 million cases and the over 70,000 dead, although it's actually almost 80,000. Although no scary graphics. Again, Fox News is so well known for their scary graphics. They don't show a big map of the U.S. with red blotches on it like some of the other news stations, even though that's like Fox News's whole modus operandi for things that are scary to Americans to make people watch. But anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary with Chris Wallace and then David Spunt together over here.
Hello again and happy Mother's Day from Fox News in Washington. For 2 months now, we've seen the devastating effect of the coronavirus on this country, with more than 1.3 million cases and more than 78,000 deaths. But on Friday, we got our best sense yet of the economic damage. With official word, the U.S. now faces the highest level of unemployment since the Great Depression. In a moment, we'll speak with the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin. But first, let's bring in David Spunt with the fallout from the worst jobs report in the nation's history. David.
Chris, good morning. Even President Trump is having a hard time finding the silver lining, saying this week that he's not surprised by these numbers. But the big question, Chris, can President Trump and the Democrats come together for the good of those in need? The numbers are grim. Almost 21 million Americans lost their jobs in April, pushing the unemployment rate to 14.7%.
It sounds like a terror movie, all these movies that we see on TV, but it's the reality.
We need food. My son-in-law is laid off, my daughter-in-law is laid off, and I'm handicapped.
Democrats and Republicans are at a standstill on a Phase 4 stimulus bill to boost the economy.
One thing we could do is a payroll tax cut. That seems to bother the Democrats.
People like McConnell and McCarthy and even Trump who say, let's wait and do nothing. Well, they remind me of the old Herbert Hoovers. We had the Great Depression. We need Franklin Rooseveltian type action.
43 governors have partially reopened their states, while others remain cautious as the virus continues to spread.
It can happen anywhere. It's a very elusive enemy.
Including the White House, where Vice President Mike Pence's press secretary Katie Miller tested positive for the virus, as did a personal valet to the president. First daughter Ivanka Trump's personal assistant also tested positive. FDA Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn, CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield, and Dr. Anthony Fauci are all under quarantine after being exposed at the White House. The three doctors, Chris, are expected to testify in front of the Senate on Tuesday in just a few days. Doctors Hahn and Redfield will testify remotely. Fauci is expected to show up in person, likely wearing a mask. Meanwhile, all White House employees are told to telework when possible. Chris.
David Spunt reporting from the White House. David, thank you. And joining us now, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin.
And I do have a clip of that Stephen Mnuchin clip after... Now I've shown all the news summaries. Now I have my newsmaker clips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 5.5 because one of the newsmaker clips is a replay. And the first one is Steve Mnuchin, where, you know, I pretty much pre-criticized that Fox News Sunday news summary before I showed it. I did want to give Chris Wallace some credit. Like I've said, even though... Fox News is a partisan arm of the Republican Party, and at this point is kind of Trump TV, and you can see the loudest voice in the room. As I said, you want to read a whole book about how Fox News was created for the purpose of being propaganda for the Republican Party. That's and if you watched my YouTube channel which I've been doing since July 2006. That's coming up on 14 years, and for the first half of that time, I made a lot of Fox News bias videos, so I think I've proven that point. But that doesn't mean that sometimes journalism doesn't occur, and Chris Wallace did have Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins University. I can never remember his whole big long title. It's like the School of Public Health Security, or I'm not going to go look it up, but he was on there, and he did get some real facts out there about how there's not enough testing, and how a lot of states haven't met the guidelines for opening up, but they're opening up anyway, and some of those actual facts did come out on Fox News Sunday in clips I didn't take, but I did want to show this one clip of Steve Mnuchin responding to a question from Chris Wallace, because he questions him both about what some of the experts have said, but first there's a clip of Trump himself saying that, you know, there's going to be a bad effect if we reopen for some people, and he doesn't show the whole clip, but this clip is like the closest Trump has come to the whole necropolitics argument that I've been talking about, that you can see discussed through this tweet from AM Joy, MSNBC last weekend, and that's at the very beginning of this Fox News Sunday questioning of Steve Mnuchin, where you'll see Trump say there's going to be some bad effect, but and he's also talking about how people are going to be warriors for our economy in this clip, and it's a very short clip. It doesn't show the whole thing, and it's not really the topic of what Steve Mnuchin talks about, but you'll see that Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday at least brings up some of the problems of reopening too soon. But in his question, he does talk about the responsibility of the governors, and you'll see that's mirrored in Steve Mnuchin's answer, because I think that's how the Trump administration is going to try to slough, in addition to blaming China for this never should have happened. Trump says that all the time. Should have been stopped so early. Never should have happened, and now it's up to 184. Like every news conference, it would be like more and more countries. It's 184 countries now. Never should have happened, if you listen to Trump. But the other part about that is how if there's any bad outcomes now, it's actually the governors who are to blame, and you'll hear the governors both in the question from Chris Wallace and the answer from Steve Mnuchin at the end of this clip that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Now the president is calling for states to reopen, and a number of governors are around the country. But this week, the president talked about the possible cost of that. Take a look.
Will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon.
But Patrick Harker, head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, says if the economy opens too soon and the virus spikes again, quote, not only would this be a health catastrophe, but it would reverse the recovery as well. If that happens, he predicts, quote, a painful economic contraction of GDP in 2021 as shutdowns are reintroduced. Do you agree that there is a considerable risk, not to say you shouldn't do it, but there is a considerable risk to reopening, both from a public health and an economic standpoint?
Chris, if we do this carefully, working with the governors, I don't think there's a considerable risk. Matter of fact, I think there's a considerable risk of not reopening. You're talking about what would be permanent economic damage to the American public, and we're going to reopen in a very thoughtful way that gets people back to work safely, that has them social distance. One of the things we've seen, Chris, is a lot of businesses can do telework. Not everybody has to come back into the office at the same time, but people will be able to go into stores. Some of them will have reservations when they go in, but businesses will be able to reopen. And I think, as you know, certain parts of the country had very devastating impacts, like New York, and certain parts of the country didn't. And this is all being monitored very, very carefully.
Let's turn to the question of if there's going to be another response from Washington, and if so, what it's going to be. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she may introduce a phase 4.
So you saw there was some questioning by Chris Wallace there of Steve Mnuchin about some of the problems, but not much follow-up there, which is why I kept playing it. And I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip before I showed it in terms of how they both seem to be saying the word governors a lot as part of the White House strategy to shift blame to the governors if there's any bad outcomes. Now, this next clip I talked about earlier is Jake Tapper actually doing good journalism in terms of cross-examining this White House senior advisor, economist Kevin Hassett. But Kevin Hassett actually also worked at CNN. He left. You'll see in his answer to Jake Tapper, he talks about how he worked at the White House and then started working for CNN and then got called back for the emergency to work for the White House again. And Jake Tapper, even so, cross-examines him about, first asks him about whether he wears a mask, and both when he talked to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union and when he talked to Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation, both of the news anchors or Sunday news analysis show anchors, I guess, let Kevin Hassett show. He's so much better at showing empathy and speaking like a real human being compared to his boss, Donald Trump. And he talks about how he's scared to go to work at the White House and how they work in cramped quarters. You'll hear that in this answer, how they're all like really working hard to save the American people and taking the risks and everything at the White House, but they don't really. And you'll see how Jake Tapper does, as a good journalist, follow up on that. Do you hear Sandy whining to my left here? That's not fair when I'm trying to do a live stream. Can you please be quiet, Sandy? I'm going to show the Dash and Sandy clip at the end, and I'm going to show Lamar Alexander's dog Rufus, but you don't have to interrupt my show. I was just talking about how Kevin Hassett, Jake Tapper does cross-examine him about how regular people don't get all the testing like all the people in the White House get all the time, so they know that they're at risk, and Trump hasn't used the Defense Production Act to make sure that the testing that is necessary is produced by the corporations. You know, I've talked about the swabs and the reagents, and what is it, the VTM, the viral transport media that we've talked about in previous shows. That's what the Defense Production Act would be used for. But the one thing Jake Tapper doesn't ask him about, and that Margaret Brennan doesn't ask about, is his whole cubic model that said that we were going to be done with coronavirus by now. There was this May the 4th Washington Post article that I put a link down in the video description to, that also shows how this other model is claiming that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of deaths. But here's Kevin Hassett's quote from the Washington Post article, or the quote about Kevin Hassett. Even more optimistic than that, however, is the cubic model prepared by Trump advisor and economist Kevin Hassett. People with knowledge of that model say it shows deaths dropping precipitously in May and essentially going to zero by May 15th. Well, we are at May 10th today, and deaths have not dropped precipitously. And in fact, the other model that is talked about in that Washington Post article says we might be up to 3,000 deaths a day by June 1st. And that's a real possibility. And Jake Tapper didn't ask about that. Neither did Margaret Brennan. But anyway, here's Jake Tapper cross-examining Kevin Hassett about other things, the lack of testing and lack of Defense Production Act. But even though it's good journalism, I don't know why no one asked him about that Washington Post article, because other people have already, or did they have some sort of deal not to mention that? Or you can let me know what you think down in the video description after we watch this 4-minute, 40-second clip from CNN's State of the Union this morning together over here.
White House Senior Advisor Kevin Hassett to talk about the economic recovery. Kevin, but I have to ask you, given these two new cases reported in the White House and key task force doctors self-quarantining, do you regularly wear a mask when you're at the White House? And are you concerned about your health and safety going to work at the White House?
Mm-hmm. You know, really, Jake, as you know, that back in March, I was still a CNN employee and you know, didn't expect to go back into the White House, but there was an emergency. They called me back in, and I built a giant data operation to help everybody track the ventilators and things like that. And I knew when I was going back in that I would be taking risks, that you know, I'd be safer sitting at home at my house than going into a West Wing that, even with all the testing in the world and the best medical team on earth, is a relatively cramped place. That we set up a big data operation in the basement when I got there, and we were interacting constantly with people who were going to and from FEMA. Right at the beginning when we were there were some people who caught COVID at FEMA. So we've all been exposing ourselves to risks, you know, under the best guidance we could possibly have to keep us safe. but we're willing to take that chance because we love our country. And I think that, there are things that have to happen in that West Wing, even if the building is a little bit old and underventilated and so on. And so, yes, I absolutely have a mask in my pocket. I could wave it at you right now, and I practice social distancing. I wear a mask when I feel it's appropriate, and so on. The mask issue is a significant one. But recall that when to get in with the president, that you have to test negative. And there's, according to what the doctors tell me, not a lot of evidence that you can pass the virus, that you have enough viral load to pass it if you test negative. And so I think that it's sound medical judgment that is urging people to be that way. And it's not my judgment, but that's what I've been told.
So the White House and White House employees benefit from surveillance testing, which is nonstop testing of individuals just to make sure you haven't contracted it, and contact tracing. For instance, those doctors, Fauci, Redfield, Hahn, all now in some form of quarantine because they came in contact with a White House staffer who tested positive. Nationwide, we are not seeing the same kind of aggressive surveillance testing and contact tracing that we're seeing in the White House. Why not? Why not implement a nationwide aggressive testing and contact tracing system? What's the downside?
No, there is no downside. In fact, we should use every single test that we can generate, and that's something that we're working overtime on ramping up testing. We tested about 300,000 people, I think, on Thursday, and there's some new tests that are being approved. And you're exactly right that the objective is to get as much testing as possible. But the really, sad story about my dear colleague in the West Wing is that even with that testing, things can slip through. And so it's a very scary time for everybody. We've got, moving in on 80,000 dead. And we've got more than 30 million getting unemployment insurance benefits. And it's a very, very stressful time for all Americans. And as we, like most every other country on earth, start to get our economy going again, it's going to be a very difficult emotional time for everybody, just like it is for the folks in the West Wing this weekend.
I want to turn to the economy, but just to put a period on this, the point that governors and others that I speak with, that they make all the time, and health officials in the administration, is they need the president to invoke the Defense Production Act so that this widespread testing, surveillance testing, contact tracing can happen, because they don't have the power to force companies to get the testing, the swabs, the reagents, the labs, the lab equipment all up to speed. So if you could convey that to President Trump, I think that's something that governors tell me all the time they need. But let's turn to the economy. That's why you're here. Millions of Americans are out of work.
One thing on
President
that, Jake.
Trump.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to throw that we're talking to governors all the time. I mean, we've got a call just about every week. I myself am taking personal calls with the governor. I met with Governor Cuomo just a couple of weeks ago. So we are absolutely, as you suggested, listening carefully to governors to find out what's going on the ground.
Okay. Invoking the Defense Production Act is what I keep hearing from people in the administration and out. But let's move on to the economy. President.
So, like I said before I showed the clip, Jake Tapper did a good job of cross-examining Kevin Hassett on that whole testing issue with the lack of use of the Defense Production Act to get the swabs and the reagents and the viral transport media and all the things that they need to do the actual amount of testing so that all Americans can be as safe as the people are in the White House and in the coronavirus task force, so they know when someone tests positive and who's been in contact with that person. That's why Robert Redfield and Anthony Fauci and Stephen Hahn from all these big coronavirus agencies, why Mike Pence was supposed to be in quarantine and he said he was going to distance for a while, and now he said no, he's not going to do that anymore, and what that's all about I don't quite understand. But that's the lack of testing that Jake Tapper cross-examined Kevin Hassett on there is important, and the lack of use of the Defense Production Act. But why Jake Tapper and Margaret Brennan, neither of them asked Kevin Hassett, about this Washington Post article that said that he had this cubic model that said that we were going to be done by now, and that's one of the reasons that the Trump administration has had all this happy talk, and that Trump at some point thought we were going to only have 60,000 deaths, and we're almost at 80,000 deaths. And on that topic, one of the models people talk about all the time is the IHME model, which is the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. I previously had a clip from Christopher Murray, the head of that institute, and he was on Face the Nation this morning, and they revised their death totals upward. If you let me check my notes, they're up to 137,000 by August. I think it's August 4th. By the beginning of August, 137,000 deaths. Where past May the 4th. That's when this Washington Post article was from May the 4th with that talked about the Kevin Hassett model. That was something that happened this week, last Monday, May the 4th. But they're saying by August the 4th, which is June, less than 3 months away, that we're going to be at 137,000 deaths. And why have they revised their model so that the number of deaths has gone up? Well, the word that kept coming up in this interview that I think is almost like a euphemism is mobility. Mobility. That's people not staying at home. It's reopening too soon. That's the mobility. And Margaret Brennan talks about, is it opening too soon, or people just like not wanting to shelter in place anymore? You know, I actually went to pick up some takeout food here in Sacramento, and California is still having some increase in cases. And there was like this weird farmer's market going on in front of the restaurant I was trying to pick up food at. I wore a mask. I tried to engage in social distancing, but there were a lot of people who weren't wearing masks and weren't engaging in social distancing right here in Sacramento. And these weren't protesters at the Capitol. These were just like people out on a nice day, on a nice Saturday, and I'm worried that people are just engaging in too much mobility, and that's both because states are opening up too soon and people are just going out too soon. And that's what you'll hear about from Christopher Murray, the doctor from the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, talking to Margaret Brennan in this clip.
One of the national death toll models that the White House is watching closely is from the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. You've often heard it referred to as IHME. And they have some brand new projections out this morning. Institute Director Dr. Christopher Murray is in Seattle, and he joins us. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your model showing you today?
So our projections through till August 4th are up. We're up to 137,000 deaths that we expect to see. And that's the effect of two things going in opposite directions. Some goodish news coming out of New York and New Jersey and Michigan, where the death cases and death numbers are coming down faster than expected. Some other states where cases and deaths are going up more than we expected. Illinois, and then Arizona, Florida, California as examples of that. And so it's the balancing of those that is driving our numbers. And then, of course, we're seeing just explosive increases in mobility in a number of states that we expect will translate into more cases and deaths, in 10 days from now.
This is today the second time in about a week that you've raised these projections. What's driving the change?
Well, what's driving the change is simply put the rise in mobility, and that's the key driver. We're seeing in some states, a 20 percentage point increase in just 10 days in mobility, and that will translate into more human contact, more transmission. And then the other thing that we're seeing in some states is, which is why we like to revise the forecasts on a very regular basis, is that we're just seeing more cases and deaths than expected in certain places. but it's mostly mobility that's driving up the numbers.
And you are looking at mobility through tracking cell phone data. Is this mobility because of loosened restrictions, or is it just quarantine fatigue and people are going out and about more than they should?
You know, I think it is a bit of both. We're seeing increases in mobility even in anticipation of the relaxation of social distancing, but there's definitely a correlation. The places that are taking off the social distancing mandates, the bump in mobility appears to be larger. So somewhere like Georgia, which was one of the first, we're seeing it's in that category of a pretty big increase. So it's definitely a mixture of both, we believe.
You know, we spoke just.
So there is the modification upward of the IHME model from the director of the IHME himself, and the reason, increased mobility, as I discussed before I showed the clip, and you saw Margaret Brennan tease out what exactly increased mobility means, and it means both, basically opening too soon and leaving in anticipation of the opening. And several weeks ago I showed this, I think it was a Morgan Stanley graph I found, where it talked about how there was going to be a coastal peak and then a rest of the U.S. peak, and it's looking more and more likely that that's what's going to happen. And anyway, the IHME model is modified to show that, which is much better than that cubic model that no one asked Kevin Hassett about, that I'm still worried about. I'm still whining about how neither Jake Tapper nor Margaret Brennan on CNN or CBS asked Kevin Hassett about that Washington Post story about how we were going to be done with COVID-19 deaths by May 15th. But even though Jake Tapper didn't do that this week, last week I did check my notes. He's the one who actually asked Larry Kudlow, the director of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, or whatever his title is, how months ago he said that the coronavirus was contained airtight or almost airtight, and Jake Tapper cross-examined him about that. That didn't come up when George Stephanopoulos talked to Larry Kudlow on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning. But he did show this clip that surfaced of former President Barack Obama talking to thousands of people on some sort of call, so he probably knew that this was going to get out to the press, where he talks about how Trump's response to the coronavirus has been bad and chaotic, and everything we know is true. And here's George Stephanopoulos at least asking Larry Kudlow about that, and then you hear a long tirade, well, tirade's not the right word, but a long spiel of talking points from this Trump administration economic advisor who was hired because Trump liked the way he sounded on Fox News all the time, giving happy talk about the economy and how things are just going to be great if you just re-elect Donald Trump. And afterwards, things are going to be great. As I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Together over here.
We've now heard from President Obama, former President Obama, for the first time on his take on how the White House has responded to this crisis. Let's listen.
It has been an absolute chaotic disaster when that mindset of what's in it for me and to heck with everybody else, when that mindset is operationalized in our government.
Your response?
With all due respect to the former president, and I really don't want to get into a political back and forth here, I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, with all the assistance we've done, with all the infrastructure that we, the Trump administration, working with governors and mayors and with Congress, with respect to testing, with respect to all manner of PPE, medical equipment, with respect to ventilators. This President Trump, one thing shouldn't be lost here. He has, and it's unusual in these emergency situations, he's made great use of the private sector. Talking about that earlier in terms of reopening in a safe manner. We have relied very heavily on the smartest people in this country who run retail operations, pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies. You've got automobile companies producing ventilators at a rapid rate. We've ramped up the testing. We have the world's largest testing percentages by far. So I don't understand what President Obama is saying. It just sounds so darn political to me. I just want to say this. Look, what we've done may not be 100% perfect. These things happen once every 100 years. But the overall picture is we've created a massive health and safety infrastructure to deal with the pandemic here in the United States. And judging from the results, where there has been a flattening in the rate of growth of infection rates and mortality rates, it's working. So we're preparing to reopen the economy. And when we do, I think, according to the Congressional Budget Office and a bunch of private surveys, we're going to see a very strong second half of the year. Probably 20% economic growth. Policies that were in place on lower taxes and lower regulations are still in place. We may expand on those policies with the Congress. Next year, 2021, could be a tremendous snapback in the U.S. economy. So I'm going to leave President Obama alone. I just want to make the case that I think is the prevailing consensus case right now.
Larry Kudlow, thanks very much for your time this morning.
And like I said, no question about the whole containment thing that Jake Tapper asked about last week, and lots of happy talk about. That's what you're going to hear from Trump all the way through the election, is the economy's going to be great after the election, not now. You're not going to feel it now. There's going to be, depression levels of unemployment at the time you're voting for me, but just trust me, just the power of positive thinking, Norman Vincent Peale or whatever. That is what's going to... And the thing is, I was really worried before this pandemic. Not that I am gloating or happy about for many reasons I'm not happy about this pandemic. Not just the human toll, but there are just a lot of ways it's not been good for me, lots of people I know, and many, many people around the world. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but... when looking at the 2020 campaign, it looked like even though a lot of people didn't like Trump, he had approval ratings that weren't as good as any other president who had a good economy would have, but they were being kept artificially high by this good economy that he inherited from President Obama, who you heard from in that clip at the beginning of that last clip. That audio that leaked from President Obama. And Trump finally broke the great economy he got from Barack Obama. Trump broke America, basically. I've been thinking about making a video with the title Trump Broke America. Maybe that'll be the title of one of my live streams one of these Sundays. But Larry Kudlow's happy talk there about how things are going to be great if you just re-elect Donald Trump, even though things are terrible now. And it's morning in America, Mourning. But anyway, I finally want to get to the Meet the Press clip I promised earlier. Lamar Alexander talking to Chuck Todd this morning on NBC News' Meet the Press. And, Lamar Alexander chairs the committee that Anthony Fauci is going to testify to in the Senate. Trump wouldn't let him testify to the House because it's all the Democrats unfair. Why would I, it's all partisan, unfair Democrats in the House, but at least he's going to go testify to Lamar Alexander. And Lamar Alexander in this next clip talking to Chuck Todd mentions how he's skeptical of the Trump administration claim that they're going to have millions of vaccines available at the end of 2020, which is much faster than Fauci ever thought. Or, it's supposed to be 18 months to a vaccine, and we're only a couple months into the 18 months. So that's a good question to ask Anthony Fauci when he testifies to your committee Lamar Alexander. That's my suggestion. But like I said, I didn't think there was anything really remarkable about this Lamar Alexander interview until I saw it trending on Twitter, and they talking about the dog in the background. And so after I show Lamar Alexander talking about the rosy predictions on vaccines from Trump, and also his whole idea, there's a clip before this I didn't take where he talks about there being a Shark Tank of ideas where they're going to have this electronic lollipop, which you input a swab and put it in your mouth, and then your cell phone tells you if you have COVID-19, and it's the breakthrough we need to get testing available to everyone. And you'll see, the electronic lollipop is at the end of this clip. There's also a part where Lamar Alexander, what he's saying, there's sort of a breakdown in his live stream. It's not my live stream. It was actually in the Meet the Press program, so don't blame me for Lamar Alexander not being able to say everything he wants to say in this clip. But what really trended was the dog Rufus in the background, and I'm going to focus on Rufus in the subsequent clip. But I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Lamar Alexander in the real final news clip for the program tonight over here.
Very quickly.
What do you do? Let me ask you this philosophically about businesses. You can open an economy, but you can't force the return of demand. So whether you're an airline or you're a restaurant, we know demand is going to be down, and at the same time, their demand is down through no fault of their own. How do you rescue those businesses, and how do you rescue those employees?
Number one, vaccine. And the administration has an amazingly ambitious goal of 100 million vaccines by September and 300 by December. I have no idea if we can reach that. Number two is treatments. Improved more will be this summer, but between now and then, testing. I mean, if you take a test and you know that you don't have COVID-19 and you know that everybody around you took a test that same day, you're going to have enough confidence to go back to work and back to school.
Are you concerned that the White House doesn't see the testing issue as important as you and others do?
I've talked with almost everybody on the task force. I talked with the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, who helped negotiate what we call the Shark Tank, where you throw all these early concept ideas in with Francis Collins, who heads the National Institutes of Health. I think we're all pushing for as many tests as fast as we can get them. Track one is to accelerate the technologies we already have. But if you want the lollipop that'll give you an instant test, you're going to need a new technology, and that's what Dr. Collins' Shark Tank is all about.
Final question.
So yeah, there's that whole Shark Tank where they're throwing, that's where the private sector entrepreneurs throw out ideas like this lollipop, the electronic lollipop you plug into your phone, and so everyone can test themselves. I don't know, that's the part of that, but whatever. And you heard Lamar Alexander be skeptical of the millions of vaccines available in 2020, and I hope that if he's skeptical, that question at least comes up when Anthony Fauci testifies to his committee this week, the committee that he chairs. But like I said, the thing that really trended about that was his dog in the background. People were questioning, is that a real dog? Why is it not moving at all? Why is it sleeping on the table and not the couch? I watched that over and over again, and in fact, this next clip, I don't have it shrunk down to, with the LiberalViewer logo in the background. This is full screen, focused in on the dog. I cut out the parts where it's not full screen Lamar Alexander, so this is just like full screen Lamar Alexander focused on his dog Rufus, which he claims is a real dog who likes treats and going out into the Smoky Mountains. You can watch that 51 seconds of Rufus with the audio included with some like I said, I cut out parts where they didn't show Rufus, but here's Rufus for the final sort of news clip tonight over here.
And the administration has an amazingly ambitious goal of 100 million vaccines by September and 300 by December. I have no idea if we can reach that. Number two is treatments. More will be this summer, but between now and then, testing. I mean, if you take a test and you know that you don't have COVID-19 and you know that everybody around you took a test that same day, you're going to have enough confidence to go back to work and back to school. I've talked with almost everybody on the task force. I talked with the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, who helped negotiate what we call the Shark Tank, the lollipop that'll give you an instant test. You're going to need a new technology, and that's what Dr. Collins' Shark Tank is all about.
So what do you think when I focus in on Rufus, if that's that dog's real name? That's what Lamar Alexander claims. That's a real dog named Rufus who is alive. But that was a live controversy on Twitter today. You can let me know what you think after watching that Rufus-focused clip. I also wanted to thank my Super Chat contributors. I see Lulu Girl just gave a dog bonus after this clip about whether I should dress Dash and Sandy up next week. No, they don't like to wear clothes. Well, I saw that Lulu Girl Super Chat contribution at the beginning of the program, and I kept looking for the Halloween costume I put Dash in a couple years ago. We dressed up, not Dash, Sandy, we dressed up in a Wonder Woman costume. I have that photo somewhere. It might be on my LiberalViewer Facebook page or Instagram. There are links to that down in the video description. I see Sexy Bob gave a contribution for Dandy. Nelson 100. Also, I appreciate the Super Chat contributions. I appreciate the people who support me on Patreon. There's a link down in the video description to Patreon, which is actually the thing that's most reliable for me. There's also a join button from YouTube down there that's also fairly reliable monthly income to support my video production. There's also a link down in the video description to support my channel through PayPal. At the $5 level, I send out these hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl stickers. At the $10 level, this is PayPal and Patreon. On YouTube, it's a little bit different. I also send out this ACLU Constitution. Sandy's whining over there, which means I'm probably been talking too long without showing my bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end. And this is a clip of Dash and Sandy I took early this morning when I fed Sandy, and Dash was drinking from Sandy's water bowl as Sandy was eating from his food bowl, or her food bowl. Dash is a boy, Sandy's a girl. Dash is the cat, Sandy is the dog in the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip to finish the show tonight over here. And there you go, the Dandy or the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the night. That's my program. I hope you appreciated the 8 or 9 hours I spent this Sunday and every Sunday for the last 368 Sundays picking out these clips, putting together my commentary and criticism and broadcasting it to you so I could experience it with my live viewers and, of course, respond to the comments from the recorded show viewers. I almost made a video this week about the whole General Flynn controversy. I thought that was really bogus based on my experience as a criminal defense attorney, and I'm thinking I might make a video this week when there are live audio oral arguments from the Supreme Court because of COVID-19. And this week, on Tuesday, they're taking up the issue of whether Trump's tax return should be released. And I think that might actually happen before the election, which could be a huge bearing on this whole Russia collusion thing. If Trump has all these Russian loans in his tax returns, which of course is possible, especially if you read Russian Roulette, this book over here. But so maybe I'll have time to make that live stream or video based on what happens at the Supreme Court. But oh, Sandy's whining again. So I should probably finish up. I appreciate everyone who joined me, everyone who gives me supportive comments, thumbs up, subscribes to my channel, supports me in all the other ways I talked about. And until next Sunday, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.